Have you ever felt like a total fraud in a room full of smart people? Like any moment, someone's going to stand up and say, you don't belong here. You're not alone. In fact, that sinking feeling might be a surprising sign that you're actually growing. Today, we're going to dive into the valley of despair. That's where imposter syndrome lies. This is language from the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I want to help you understand that painful part of the learning journey. And more importantly, how to climb out. I'm speaking from experience here. Welcome to the Lighthouse Leadership Podcast. I'm Evan Hickok. I've got over 20 years experience designing and managing high complexity systems in high consequence environments. I've done this as a systems engineer, as a program manager, guiding projects through every phase of the product lifecycle. And I'm here to share my insights on building high performing teams capable of delivering exceptional results even in the most challenging environments. And this always starts internally, right? The inside game dictates the outside game. We got to start internally. I also publish the Lighthouse Leadership newsletter almost weekly at evanhickok.com. It's all in the show notes. Let's get into it. Back in 2015, during her Harvard commencement speech, actress Natalie Portman admitted something deeply personal. Let's hear it from her.
So I have to admit that today, even 12 years after graduation, I'm still insecure about my own worthiness. I have to remind myself today, you are here for a reason. Today, I feel much like I did when I came to Harvard Yard as a freshman in 1999, when you guys were, to my continued shock and horror, still in kindergarten. I felt like there had been some mistake, that I wasn't smart enough to be in this company, and that every time I opened my mouth, I would have to prove I wasn't just a dumb actress.
So listen to that again. Natalie Portman, at that point, she'd already been in The Professional. She'd already been in the Star Wars Episode 1. And yet she's describing this self-doubt. She's drowning in it just because she got to Harvard, right? So right there, that's very telling. Imposter syndrome, this valley of despair, this happens at threshold moments, right? We're starting something new. She's starting something new. The first thing you need to understand is this is transient. This is a phase. And that's how you're going to get through it. So the language that she's using, the self-doubt language, this is imposter syndrome. She's describing imposter syndrome. That's the language of imposter syndrome. And I've been there too. Now, I didn't fully understand what I was experienced until I learned about the Dunning-Kruger effect. But once I saw this curve, and I'll show you in a moment, I could name the shape of my journey. And I finally understood what I was feeling. And most importantly, what to do next. So let's talk about Dunning-Kruger. So psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger discovered this simple but powerful paradox. It's just two parts. First part, people with little experience often overestimate their abilities. Second part, people with more experience often underestimate their abilities. Now, why would that happen? Well, because beginners don't know what they don't know. And experts, they know what they don't know. So when you don't know what you don't know, you overestimate what you know. When you do know what you don't know, you actually underestimate your capability because you see how much growing there is to do. Now, you can plot this on a graph. It looks like this roller coaster. First, for you on YouTube, you can see the image. You can see it on my website, evanhickok.com. I'll describe it to you who are just listening. Draw this. Take out a pencil and draw this. On the x-axis, this is experience, right? Left to right is experience. As you move to the right of this graph, you're gaining experience. And then the y-axis is your confidence. So as you go up, your confidence is higher. So the first thing that happens is you gain a little bit of experience, you get the sharp rise of confidence. And you're saying sometimes you're saying, oh, this isn't as hard as I thought, right? So, and then you get to this peak here. This is called the peak of stupidity. This is when you don't know what you don't know. Because then what happens is all of a sudden you learn something and your experience increases. But what happens is you have this steep drop in confidence. We call that the valley of despair. This is where imposter syndrome lies. Now, if you can get through this valley of despair, what you'll experience is a slow, steady climb as real expertise builds. So you're moving to the right on the experience graph, and you're also going upwards on the confidence graph. We call that the slope of enlightenment. Your expertise is built very, very slowly. Now, there's an emotional twist in here, right? Coming off of this peak of stupidity, you're getting better, but your confidence drops. And that feels shocking. You feel worse, but you're actually becoming smarter. And that's the paradox. Now, this stuff happens in childhood all the time. When my daughter first learned what a bee was, she proudly declared that everything was a bee. That's a bee, that's a bee, anything flying. She was at her peak of stupidity. She thought she knew everything. Then she learned about houseflies, and she thinks, okay, there's two kinds of bees. There's yellow bees and there's black bees. But then we went camping, and she saw a dragonfly, and a dragonfly looks completely different than a bee. It's got a long body. It's green. It's got these 4 sets of wings, and it can hover. It flies backwards. Nothing like a bee. And she thought, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn. And so this is the key, right? We think we know everything, and then we learn something new that disconfirms our prior experience. You're not actually getting dumber. You're getting smarter. In the example of my daughter, she realized the world was more complex than she knew. And that awareness is actually the start of growth. So the chances are, if you're Googling Dunning-Kruger or the Valley of Despair right now and you found this, chances are you're not failing. You're actually growing. Now, so why does it hit harder in adulthood than childhood? Well, kids live in wonder. Everything is new. But as adults, we get used to our routines. We've experienced so much. There's not a lot of newness anymore, and we get comfortable. Then what happens is life throws us this curveball. We get a promotion. Now we're in a leadership role or something, some stretch assignment. And suddenly, our confidence crumbles because the skills that got us to this moment are no longer quite sufficient. We need new skills. We just got to figure out what those are. Now, this happened to me, and it was brutal. I remember saying out loud, I am not the right person for this moment. You can look at my website, and I've got an article called something like a letter to myself 10 years ago. And that letter is going back to me 10 years ago, kind of really at that low moment here. But looking back, I could actually see I was performing well in the moment. I just couldn't see in the moment. The key is mindset. Let's talk about learning mindset a little bit. Albert Einstein wrote a lot of letters to kids. There's a whole compilation of these letters. And in there is a letter he wrote to a 12-year-old named Barbara who lived in Washington, D.C. And she described that she was struggling with her math. She says in her letter that she spends more time working on math than her classmates do. And Einstein writes back, he says, do not worry about your difficulties in mathematics. I can assure you that mine are still greater. This is one of the greatest mathematicians in the world, yet Einstein feels the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be. He could see the work he still had to do. He could see how much he still had to learn. He's not in the valley of despair. He's got this great expertise. He can just see how much further he goes. And the key is, instead of quitting, right, he stays curious. Now, Tom Hanks has talked about this too. He did an interview with Terry Gross of Fresh Air back in 2016. He was promoting a film called, I think it's called The Hologram. I've never actually seen it, but he can, acting's about empathy, right? It's about, understanding how to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And in this, he is empathizing with this imposter syndrome that this character is feeling. And what he says is remarkable. Let's hear it from him.
The other one is, I think, something that is real to all of us. The shark terror of a loss of confidence in ourselves. No matter who we are, no matter what we've done, there comes a point where you think, how did I get here, and am I going to be able to continue this? When are they going to discover that I am, in fact, a fraud and take everything away from me? It's a high wire act that we all walk, and I do this in the work that I do, because there are days when I know that 3 o'clock in the tomorrow afternoon, I am going to have to deliver some degree of emotional goods. And if I can't do it, that means I'm going to have to fake it. And if I fake it, that means they may catch me at faking it. And if they catch me at faking it, well, then it's just doomsday.
Tom Hanks is one of the greatest actors of our generation, right? But he has been there, and he's in there. He's actually describing that he's there all the time. And it's one of the things that compels him to good performance, because he doesn't want to fail, but there's always that possibility, that high wire act. Now, here's another example. Last August, I was in America, and I was sitting with one of my nieces, and she had just finished her first year of university, and I was talking to her about it. And she had dropped a college course, but she dropped it after the professor asked her to tutor it. Like, that's a remarkable example, right? The professor says, hey, I'd like you to tutor this class. And she says, I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. And she drops the class. Like, obviously, she's one of the top students in the class, if not the top. But she felt like an imposter. She felt like she was unqualified. Now, why does that happen? Well, it's because she had started to see how much there was to learn. But the thing is, she's ahead of her classmates and she's learning. So I grabbed the crayon and I grabbed an envelope and I sketched out this Dunning-Kruger curve. And I walked her through this curve. I say, the thing that you're actually feeling, you're feeling growth. So not knowing something can feel pretty uncomfortable, but learning that thing feels exciting. And so the thing we have to move through, this transient discomfort of not knowing something and then go and know it and get back on that exciting curve. That's that slope of enlightenment. My niece hugged me. And then she hung that sketch on her dorm room wall. It's like, geez, this is powerful. I think that curve changed everything for her. And it might for you too. It certainly did for me. Let me describe another valley I've been in, another valley of despair. Before I ever worked in systems engineering or leadership, I was in theater. We're going back over 30 years now. I remember when I was 16, I actually joined a summer theater company and I fell in love with the work. I loved reading, writing, working with my hands, solving problems. I was using both sides of my brain. It was exhilarating. And I climbed fast. I worked all kinds of professional gigs. I would miss high school to go work a big load-in. I toured with a magic show for a year. I worked concerts for like U2, Dave Matthews Band. I worked in Ozfest. But eventually the freelance life wore me down. Like nobody goes to concerts or theater in January. And I didn't know that. And all of a sudden there was no income and I ran out of money and I couldn't afford food. And so I decided I better go to university to increase my skills. My skills weren't enough to sustain myself. So I went to university. I went to UMass Amherst and I went to study theater. So I get to university and I actually have more professional experience than most of my classmates have amateur experience. So, I was like the best in this at high school. I get to university. I'm already the best. I'm in this undergraduate scenic design class and, you can just see I'm head and shoulders above people. And my professor, his name's Miguel Romero, a brilliant guy, amazing designer. Like he learned from Oliver Smith, who's one of the greatest scenic designers in Broadway history. He designed West Side Story. Like I could probably stop there. Anyhow, one of Oliver Smith's students, Miguel Romero, is seeing something in me. He invites me to this graduate level design class. This is a huge opportunity. But the problem was, I wasn't actually ready to learn. I was used to showing people how good I already was. And now I get to this graduate level class and I'm just getting torn to pieces. Now there's this other undergraduate in that class, David. So it's 3 graduate students. They're about 25, 2 undergraduates, David and I. We're like 19, 20, something like that. I really struggled in this class. I looked around and I was head and shoulders above everybody. I'd been head and shoulders almost since I walked in the door of a theater. It's something I just learned very quickly. I was head and shoulders in the undergraduate classes and now I'm in this graduate level class and I'm like underwater, instantly the worst person in the class. And I built this model of a set, I built this like round staircase and, all these beautiful columns and these windows and everything's just getting torn to pieces. And I wasn't used to that. I was used to people telling me how good I was, not how much I had to learn. Now, the other undergraduate, David showed up. He took feedback and he kept getting better. And he was so talented when he was like 20. And guess what? His name's David Corrins. Google him. He is a Tony Award nominated designer. He designed Hamilton. Do I need to say any more? He designed Hamilton. He designed Beetlejuice. He just designed Tommy last year on Broadway. If you watched the 92nd Academy Awards, the Oscars, you've seen his work because he designed that entire stage. Amazing. Now, he and I had the same opportunity. He leaned in. I changed my major. I was used to being the best. I wasn't used to getting feedback. I fell from the peak of stupidity in the valley of despair, and I could not transition through it to the path of enlightenment. That was my first fall into the valley of despair. Years later, as a leader, I fell into that valley again, but this time I had a name for it. I knew what it meant. Changing majors in college felt like a failure, but it prepared me for moments like this one, when confidence drops because competence is building. That's the paradox. Confidence drops. Competence is actually building. Now, this framework gave me tools. It gave me language, and it changed everything. Self-awareness is so important. So here's the bottom line. Growth doesn't feel like growth. It feels like struggle. Anybody who goes to the gym understands that. No pain, no gain. Learning is the same way. So if you're doubting yourself, if you're feeling like a fraud, it's probably because you've gotten smarter. Maya Angelou said this once. She said, I've written 11 books. Each time I think, they're going to find me out now. Natalie Portman, Tom Hanks, Tina Fey has talked about this. Maya Angelou, they're not failing. They're growing. And so are you. Here's how you climb out of the valley. You need to reframe learning as your job. Don't value having all the answers. Ask great questions and let those questions lead to the answers. Your job is learning. You ever hear that John Mayer song, Why Georgia? John Mayer wrote this song at like the height of his career. So that song is about making a big transition. John Mayer was born in like Bridgeport, Connecticut, I think. He went to Berklee School of Music in Boston. He drops out of Berkeley to move to Georgia to try to start his professional career, which he did. But he doubts himself the whole way. He's got a line that says, don't believe me when I say I've got it down. That is such a great line. It's about continuing to learn. That's how you get better. That's how you become a professional. Teddy Roosevelt addresses this too in his autobiography, and he's got a simple mantra. He says, do what you can with what you've got where you are. Progress does not require perfection. It requires movement. I've created a free guide to help me pull out of these moments when I feel like I'm lacking confidence. Just a few questions that I ask myself, like what changed? What is this learning opportunity? If you're interested in that, there's a link in the show notes. You can go to my website, evanhickok.com, and you can find it there. And thanks for listening to the Lighthouse Leadership Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, feel free to share it with someone climbing their own slope of enlightenment. And remember, you're not lost. You're learning. Ciao.